Elon Musk suing OpenAI. This combination of AI and robotics. This week there was an amazing model by Alibaba called Emo. Welcome to This Week in AI. Busy week as usual. There's some really interesting things around robotics and AI, as well as a lot of stuff that's happening in the Australian AI ecosystem. Let's kick off. Elon Musk suing OpenAI. That's obviously a big news.
Is it though? Is it big news? I don't know.
Well, I think this is a play. Is this okay to have a non-profit organization turn to a for-profit organization?
You heard the phrase? It's kosher, but it stinks. They did it legally, but it doesn't mean it's nice.
Yeah, yeah. Look, but he's also, there's also something there. Is this a commercial decision to protect your own company in terms of what he's doing with Grok? It is a little bit of a strange play as well in terms of being able to do that and being one of the first shareholders. I think the interesting thing is as well is there's another company, French company Mistral, had a model as well. They've now gone. They used to be an open source. They've also gone closed shop, so they've got some really great things happening. Is this going to be the future as well, where we have the open source goes closed because it's the business model works better for them? And ironically, Meta are the ones that have open source models now, and there's less options, which is a shame. Maybe it's not that much news, but I do think it's an interesting thing to see where that will go. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think it's just fluff? Do you?
I think Elon is an interesting character that has a lot of money, and he has a cadres of lawyers working for him that for prices that we buy coffee, he can finance a lawsuit for millions of dollars. So I think it's a great why not moment. Why not sue OpenAI? What they did was wrong, in his opinion. So let's take them to court and see if something come out of it. I don't think it's much more of a clever little business strategy there. I mean, maybe some strategy guy sitting and thinking, oh, that will help this, they'll help that. But I think from a perspective of the actual character, Mr. Musk, which I respect, it's allowed to do. Technically speaking, legally speaking, they could have done that. I don't think they breached any particular law or covenant, but they shouldn't have done that. But the bottom line is that I think there's a story here that are they really building a artificial intelligence, or are they building a new way to engage with information? Does it tell you something about that they're not achieving their mission of building AGI? Yeah, that's my hot take of the day. It's like it's a bit of a nothing burger, that lawsuit. So she's lawsuit. Yeah, okay.
So, look, on that note, other news. Did you see about Figure AI, this robotics startup? They've raised a reasonable money, 675 mil, teamed up with OpenAI as well and Microsoft to build that. I guess this combination of AI and robotics. We're starting to see more and more of that. Back to Elon as well. Tesla are doing some things in that space as well. Just interesting to see that's the progression, and we're now moving not just from the language models and all of these things to now into that human, that sort of physical form and robotics, and we're seeing quite a few things in that investment space. I think this is logically the next step where we're going to be going.
I think the robots are coming, but all bets are off because the business model of building hardware, robotic hardware, is like dramatically different than SaaS. So I don't expect particularly that on a grand scheme, it's not necessarily the case that those who were great in building, SaaS software are going to be the ones who's great in building and commercializing like complex hardware play. The only one that example we have of basically a Silicon Valley-ish company that's doing amazing in that type of mechanical hardware, it's of course Tesla. So in that regards, Tesla has a bit of a, I guess, reputational advantage. But it's definitely an example of like you need a startup that's dedicated to a particular mission. So yeah, I'm curious about, so AI is going to be the brain and the robotics and this Figure AI is going to be like the actual hardware. What's the play there?
Look, I think they're going to use these models to drive it out, and the robotics, we're going to take this into a physical form. So I think that combination of those two pretty deep tech companies that are going to be able to provide more value, and that's the end goal here. So look, I think this is still early. We're going to see where that goes. On that note, Apple's done almost the opposite. They've dropped their Apple Car project to focus purely on AI. So I think people are starting to niche and start to work out where they should spend their time, because each one of these are big challenges. And so, look, once again, we've talked about Apple for a while now. We're waiting to see where they'll go with things, but you can start to see there's this focus. Companies like Meta, before they were focused on the the metaverse was going to be their thing. They've now doubled down on AI, and you've seen the impact that's had on their company. They've turned things around quite significantly. Apple's starting to do the same thing, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in their space. Last week I was in Sydney and saw some really interesting founders starting to really try and bring some interesting products to market, and that's going to be where I think our next phase of this development is going to go, which is developing really niche products or developing products that are going to change the way we work. And it's starting to happen. There was an interesting article in AFR this week that was about Australians being unconvinced about AI safety. Saying only 2 out of 5 respondents in the survey believe that the benefits of AI outweigh the risks. And so we see there's a lot of really, I guess people are kind of scared by this technology. Some interesting things around across different states in Australia. ACT, where I am, seem to be more open to what we can do with AI. Yeah, look, so there was a report by the Boston Consulting Group that this article was about, and it was really talking about how different parts of Australia and different people are adopting AI, and sort of talking about the knowledge. And so people with the highest levels of AI knowledge were 4 times more likely to take on, using AI. The report sort of said it was 15 times more likely than those with no knowledge. So there's this real fear, and then there's real adoption. And I think that's what I'm really seeing is businesses that are taking things on are moving forward and having greater opportunities, and the people that aren't, that are missing out on this, who are scared and sitting on their hands because it's just, I guess, quite confronting and threatening with this big change, are really sitting back from this. And I think this is a bit of a concern, and there is some initiatives that are out there now around educating people in this space. And so look, we'll see how this evolves over time in Australia. What do you think about what's happening in Australia and the general view of AI in Australia?
I think it represents the newness of the technology and the phenomenon, and the fact that people really had a time to understand it and play with it to a great extent. So the natural fear right now are misinformation, disinformation, election interference, and they're natural because the first few things we've seen are things that can generate convincing text at the press of a button, and now convincing videos. So it is scary, there's no doubt. If you're not scared, you're not paying attention. I think it's the right phrase. I want to believe that over time the fears will reduce. People were afraid of pandemics for a long time, and then it kind of subdued, and then pandemic erupted upon us. So those people who are fear mongers, labeled fear mongers, they're a necessary part of society that shine a light into a particular danger that people needs to react to. I'm not surprised that this is the current state of AI perception. I think it will improve. I think it's the vision of slowly finding a way to regulate this technology is taking shape in front of our eyes. Too early to call if it's effective and viable, but it's not a bad start. No one likes government regulation, especially the guys in Silicon Valley. It's unfortunately a part of life, and then they're all afraid of regulatory capture, and there's a lot of noise about that. Well, that's the kind of the dilemmas of the era right now is find the correct balance between regulatory capture and the total opposite. Obviously, the truth is always in the middle somewhere. It's not black or white. Enlightened regulation is what we should strive towards, and it's a continuous strive. Do you know how it impacts like specific businesses in a very concrete way, besides a bit of a headline that they adopt a standard? Like, if I've got an AI business, what exactly do I need to do? Do I need to get a consultant from the Big Four to actually, stamp my operation again? It just adds a bit of cost to the whole thing. What's the story?
Look, I don't know the full details. I think that's the problem with some of this is there's some very high level things, and how we actually implement or what you actually have to do has not really been nutted out, because I think people are still trying to work this out. So I will look into more details, and maybe we can have a further discussion of that later on. There's so many of these models, right? One's outdoing the other. So whether I see Alibaba doing something, I see Adobe creating a product very similar, I see, Google, you see OpenAI. It's becoming just commoditized, and one's outdoing each other by a little bit. But when you're actually developing applications, is this going to be significant that we have? I think these baseline models are going to be part of every kind of development. So I don't know, like every week I'm seeing big shifts forward. Like this week there was an amazing model by Alibaba. I think it's called Emo. Take a photo, it turns that into a talking video. We saw Adobe bring out some things around being able to use audio, be able to prompt and make music. But once again, this how do you cut through? I think that's really the challenge: is which one of these is going to win, or is there going to be a winner, or are these just going to be baseline tools that we all use as part of developing applications? And once again, even Microsoft this week, what they did is they announced a co-pilot for finance. And I think last week we talked about the fine-tuning of models to specific verticals. This is what's going to happen more.
We are in an era of Cambrian explosion of innovation.
So I'll tell you a trend that I'm seeing. Many people in their early 20s who are not coders saying, I want to come and work. They keep coming to me and saying, I want to work in this tech space. Probably double that age where people are coming back and who have been in other industries saying, I'm going to come and develop some products in this area. And so I think this is what excites me, is having a new range of people that are excited and developing this that aren't just techie. Let's talk about a couple of the raises that have been this week. There was a company in the US, I think Base Immune. They closed an 11.3 million Series A. And that's really around using AI to accelerate vaccines or AI designed vaccines. And I think that's quite an interesting one. Another couple of raises, Ideogram raised 80 million for a Series A around AI image generation tech. That's another interesting one. Look, there's a quick news item. The Australian Effie Awards have a new AI category. And I think that's interesting to see. This is starting to take place into both the creative space, in the advertising space, but Advertising Council Australia, so ACA. And so the entrants must demonstrate how AI drove efficacy over those traditional approaches. So at least we're seeing people wanting to give people awards for using this technology, and shows that the adoption is being more and more accepted, showing that this will be, I guess, a category that is in its own now. And I think that's really important that people are looking to do things in this space. So that's another interesting bit of news here in Australia. The Queensland AI Hub has launched an early stage accelerator for AI companies, AI ML models, bringing them to market. So I think this is really great for founders. It's a great side that we're maturing in Australia. So they're taking applications now to be part of that accelerator. And so I think for anyone out there that's founders watching this, go and check it out. I think it's a great way to launch an AI MVP or just really be around that community. And it's good to see more and more things that are at that grassroots in Australia. And so that's a great sign for the ecosystem in Australia. So that's great. One thing that was clear to me as well, and about Australia, I was away over the weekend with a few other VCs, some founders, but they talked about the fact that they raised their first seed round of funding in Australia. Raising it in Australia, it was relatively cheap. Funding a company in Australia, they had their first round here, their pre-seed stage here, and that was something around the $4 or $5 million mark. And then they had their seed round raised in the US. And they had a multiplier of 5 times straight away in the US. The company was valued a lot more. And so I think there's some really interesting opportunities by starting a company in Australia.
I always think Australia is a great launchpad. I always used to say that if you play the game Risk, and like at the beginning of the game, you get a bit of Australia, the first thing you do is you take over Australia and start collecting the extra points every turn. So people complain about Australia is that it's too far. So some businesses they're just happy to stay local and they never make it out. I think that's a problem of the older generation of founders. I don't see that. Don't see that anymore. I think Australia is benefiting from natively speaking, English native speaking of the population, great understanding of consumer products and enterprise SaaS specifically, a growing concentration of talent. That's really important. That's that's hard to measure. And I think that's kind of keep growing. So yeah, absolutely. I'm a guy who startup in Australia and went globally. So obviously I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid here. Also, it's easier to outsource to Vietnam and India and whatnot from here because of time zones. So there's a lot of benefits. There's reasons to do that. The challenge is breaking into the US. But guess what? Every other company is finding challenge to break into the US, including the US companies. So it's on the whole, there's certain advantages here that you should consider, and so I'm pro that.
Excellent. You're the poster child for that, then, Dror, being an AI founder who went to the big smoke and sold their business. So yeah, I mean, look, that's why we do what we do. We want to support the Australian founders and companies. So look, that's another week of This Week in AI. If you enjoy these videos, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear feedback about what's good, bad, and equally what you want us to cover. So please do follow us, support the channel, share it with other people. That'll really help us to really get out to more people. We want to really have an open discussion about where we're going with AI. Thanks so much for supporting us. Until next week, see you later.